Hi there, and welcome to the printer driver video. I've been wanting to do this video for a while to talk about printer drivers, what they are, where they sit in your workflow, and some potholes that could wreck your prints on your way to trying to get perfect photo prints. And I'm in Qimage here, which is my own photo printing software. And Qimage has an intimate knowledge of the driver and all the settings, and it will prevent you from running into most of these potholes. But I'm doing this video as a general driver video to say, what do you have to do in other programs that might not have the ability to prevent you from running into these potholes? Lightroom, Photoshop, Affinity Photo, just about any other photo printing program or photo program that can print will run into these potholes, and they expect you to know certain things about your driver. And if you get those details wrong in the driver or those settings wrong, your prints are destined for the waste bin. So even though Qimage will prevent most of these problems, there's one that it can't prevent, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But most of these problems it can prevent, but in general, how do we make sure that we have these settings correct in the driver so that we can print from any program? Well, first let's talk about what is a driver. A driver is basically a small utility that sits between Windows and your physical printer, and its purpose is to translate the language of Windows printing into dots on the page that end up looking like what you specified, whether it's text or photos or anything. So when applications, such as Windows applications, print, they use the Windows printing language, and they print to Windows, and then Windows will take that data and send it through the driver, which translates it to information that prints on the page. So as you can see by this diagram, it's nice for software developers like me because we only have to print in the Windows language. And every app that you have on Windows, aside from RIPs or raster image processors, which we won't talk about here, normal applications that use the driver, they print to the Windows printing language. And as such, there's no reason to ask, is app A, app B, app C, or any other app compatible with your printer? The answer is always no, it's not. They don't have to be compatible with your printer. They only have to be compatible with Windows. Because when you say, print this text in the middle of the page, or print this 4x6 image in the top left corner, you're specifying those commands as Windows commands, which are universal to the Windows operating system. And it's the job of Windows and the driver to get that data to the actual printer. So as long as you have a printer driver for your operating system, your application will be compatible through that driver to the printer. So now that we understand where the driver sits in this whole process, we can start to see why we might need all of these controls here in the driver. Your printer will have different capabilities and different colors of ink. It will support different size media, different types of media, depending on what printer you have. So the printer relies on you for one main purpose, and that's the fact that since you are the one loading the paper, you need to specify the document size or the media size and the type of paper. And those are the two primary things that you need to tell the driver, because if you tell it you're going to load presentation paper matte at an 8.5 by 11 size, that better be what you're feeding the printer, or it's not going to be a good print. It might not even work. So it's depending on you for these things, and it gives you some other options like quality and color versus black and white and things like that. But let's go right into the first pothole, which is the biggest pothole. And if you print photos, you're probably going to run into this at one time or another, unless you use Qimage, which of course will handle this for you. The first pothole is color reproduction or color management. And when we talk about color management, we have to manage color either in the application or in the driver. itself, not both. So if we look at a chart on color management, we can see that you can have print color management on in the application or on in the driver, but not both, and not neither. So there is one exception to that rule. You might want color management off in both the application and the driver if you are printing color targets for profiling. Other than that, these two switches need to be in opposing positions. In other words, you're either on in the app and off in the driver, or vice versa, off in the app and on in the driver. And in the application, if you choose Application Manages Color, or in Qimage, if you've chosen your own ICC profile in Qimage, that's the equivalent of the application controlling color. You need to go into your driver, into the color correction section or color management section, and you'll have to turn color management off, no color adjustment. And if in your software you tell it to let the printer manage color instead, you can see that Qimage's AI has automatically made the setting for us. But if you're in any other application, you'll have to do that manually. You have to open the driver and you have to go into these options and select ICM on your own. Qimage has automatically selected it here, but if you're in Lightroom or Photoshop, you're going to have to do this manually. And you'll have to get this right. So in the software, if you said the printer manages color, you're going to want ICM for color mode or color correction in your driver. If you've chosen a profile, or if you've chosen Application Manages Color, you'll want no color adjustment in the driver. So that's how that works. And if you mismatch these, your prints are going to go straight into the trash bin. Your colors will look either way too overdone or they'll look dull, depending on, which error you've made here. So let's go on to the next pothole. And the next pothole that you could step into is paper size. I'm always surprised to find out how many times this happens, but if you set up your page and your preview in whatever application you're using is showing a print perfectly centered in the preview, and you print that out and it's not centered, it's off to one side, part of it's cut off, the first thing you should check is your media size. Did you select the correct media size? So if you select 13 by 19 in your driver, you're telling the driver, I'm going to load 13 by 19 paper. And if you end up loading something and you didn't realize it, like B3 size, I think is what it is almost 14 by 20. Well, that's not the size you told the driver. So obviously it's not going to look like your preview because the paper you're loading into the printer is not the size you told it. So that's one thing that can happen. And believe it or not, this orientation can even be a problem. If you're a new user, you might not realize if you choose landscape here, that doesn't mean you load the paper into the printer landscape. You always load your paper in portrait mode into the printer. You never load it landscape, wide side to the edges. You always load it portrait, even if you choose landscape. When you choose landscape here, all that does is it rotates your page in your application so that you can work with the paper this way. It doesn't mean you should load it into your printer that way. Back into this section here, the third issue that we can run into is scaling. And I'll show you a couple things with scaling here. If you choose borderless, then you get into a whole other aspect of scaling and expansion and things like that. I have a separate video on that if you want to watch that, but I'm not going to go into borderless here. But I will go into one spot that is often an issue here. If I go into more options on this particular driver, and all Epson drivers show this, they have a setting called output paper. And you may be tempted to select the same size as you selected for your media size or your document size. You might say, well, and I want you to watch this checkbox right here when I do this. You might say, well, it's 8.5 by 11, so maybe I should set this to 8.5 by 11 as well. But you'll notice that when you do that, it automatically checks reduce and large, and your driver is basically going to have a mind of its own at this point, and it's going to rescale everything that you send to it, and you're going to get the wrong size prints. Now, why does that happen? It happens because you can see that there's some non-printable margin here, and it's trying to take an 8.5 by 11 page and shrink it into this printable area on the page. Long story short, in Epson drivers, don't ever select anything except the same as document size. Output paper should always be set to same as document size. Otherwise, your prints are going to be the wrong size. And in Canon printers, let me just bring up this Canon G620 here. I'll go into the settings here. In Canon printers, they have the same type of thing here. If you select fit to page, you might have selected fit to page in your software and think, well, I should set that in the driver too. No, if you do that in the driver, you see how Canon has a similar option here, paper size, printer paper size, and it should always say same as page size. If you click fit to page in the driver, look what it's doing. It's scaling. It's going to actually do the scaling that we talked about in the Epson driver. So in a Canon driver, you always want normal size, which is the equivalent to same as paper size in the Epson driver. All of these problems with scaling can cause you to get the wrong size prints or in the wrong location on the page. Now I want to talk about one other thing here. It's not really scaling, but I'll show you what happens. If I go to a larger printer, like a roll printer here, and I'll go into the driver, and let's see, it's under layout and special settings. This fine zoom setting right here, you always want that set to no in a Canon wide format printer. And the reason is because if you turn that on and you have a large page size, it will dumb down the driver so it's not running at the full 600 ppi anymore. It might dumb it down to 200 ppi and you'll get pixelated prints. And the reason that this is here is because it's an option that allows you to send less data to the printer. But we don't have to worry about that on modern systems. We can keep this fine zoom off so it doesn't alter our size, our PPI on the printer. Let me show you an equivalent setting on something smaller like a Pro 1100. In the Pro 1100, I think we have, I'll try. You don't really have to worry about these options up here, but here's the one that I was looking for, unit of print data processing. On Canon printers, if you have this, I would just use recommended, and if you're able to change this prevention of print data loss, turn that off if you can. We can't do that here based on our other settings, but if you're able to turn this off, just turn it off. Prevention of print data loss, what that means is the same thing. Dumb down the data so that the driver has less data to work with. And you don't want that on modern printers and on modern systems. So again, Qimage will make sure that all of these options are set properly. And basically all you have to do is change your media type and media size and choose the appropriate profile here, and Qimage will do the rest. It'll make sure that all that scaling doesn't happen, and it'll make sure that the color mode is set properly. And the last thing I'll mention here is when you have a profile, most printer drivers install with some profiles. When you can, let the application manage color. Select your profile in Qimage. And in Qimage, it's easy. You can do suggest profiles, and it'll look at the printer that you're using and look at what it chose right up top here, the same media type that I have selected. So I can just click open on that, and it'll use that profile. let the application manage color when you can. Only revert to let printer driver manage color when you don't have a profile. And that's the best way to handle that. So I hope some of these tips in using the driver and overall understanding the driver will help you in operating the driver and making sure that you don't get into any of those potholes and allow you to print from any application you want. Thanks for watching.